Good evening, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the first Esquire Session in partnership with the Platinum Card by American Express. My name's Theo van den Broeke. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Esquire UK, the new Editor-in-Chief of Esquire UK. We're very, very happy to have you all here in the F1 Garage, thanks to Amex's global partnership with F1. I'm also very, very excited to have with me on stage two racing legends. Our very own champion, former F1 driver Damon Hill, of course, need no introduction, and former driver and presenter Naomi Schiff. Thank you so much for joining us.
For having us.
It's a real treat, and especially on such a busy weekend. So it's we all feel very privileged to have you here. So this evening, on the cusp of the British Grand Prix, we will be discussing the changing face of Formula One, among other motorsporting related nuggets. I don't know who wrote this script, but buckle up. It says. Actually, I wrote it, so it's on. So, Dave and Naomi, before we get into the meat of the thing, who's going to win this weekend?
Oh my goodness. You first. It's very early in the weekend, Theo, to be asking questions like that. I think, look, not rocket science here, but McLaren have been having a fantastic season, so I would say that it won't be a super dominant weekend from them. I think the others will be putting pressure on them, but I will still put one of the two McLarens on the top step of the podium, and I think just because it's the British Grand Prix, I'm going to go with Lando. But I think Oscar has a very good chance as well.
Yes, that's what we want to hear. Damon, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I agree with Naomi. There you are.
Fantastic. This is going very well.
This is going to be the form of the evening ahead.
We're used to be encouraged to debate it live on Sky, but I don't work for them anymore, so I don't have to debate it anymore. No, really, the interesting thing about this season is everything is very condensed in terms of time. I mean, fractions of a second is whether you qualify in the last 10 or not. So it will get dropped down into Q3. You know, so it's so tight. And so from track to track and temperature to temperature makes a huge difference to where you end up on the grid. These cars are incredibly sensitive.
Right.
So I don't think we can actually say for certain this is going to be good for McLaren. It might be good for Mercedes, or it might be good for Ferrari too. So I think it is unpredictable a little bit. But I mean, my expectation, if you had to put any money on it, I would say, of course, it would be a McLaren. To win. Which one, I don't know.
It's a very diplomatic answer.
Go with Oscar. So you don't agree with me 100%.
Yeah, well, if I went with Oscar at the British Grand Prix and said I thought he was going to win, I don't think I'd get out of here alive. So I'm not going to do that.
So Damon, you are joining us hot on the release of your documentary, Hill, which is now available to watch on Now TV, as I did in the car here, because it had only come out yesterday. I wasn't delaying my research.
You weren't driving, were you?
No, I wasn't driving. It's fantastic. It's a really great piece. It's very powerful. I will not lie when I say it made me shed a tear at one point. You have to watch it to see if you do the same thing. Why was it the right time for you to release a documentary now?
Well, 7 years ago was the right time.
Oh, okay.
But unfortunately, it took 7 years to make it and get it released. So, so it's just taken a long time. And of course, COVID was part of that, but also various complications. So putting together a documentary that has a lot of moving parts, so archive footage, getting rights cleared, getting the money together, all those things takes forever. And Simon Lazenby, who is the key presenter with us at Sky, he started off with the idea of doing a motor racing film, and he chose my story. But then he got diverted as well because it was taking a long time, so he got on with other projects, and so he's produced 3 or 4 documentaries in the time it took to make mine.
Wow.
So anyway, it's out now, and it's riding the back of the Brad Pitt film.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good moment.
Actually, the timing is perfect.
But it is fantastic. I mean,
got Brad Pitt or me.
Well, you're the real thing. I mean, you obviously had to really delve into your past for it. You really go deep. What did the process teach you?
Okay, so the long story is that when I stopped racing, I had 1 or 2 issues with things that were disturbing me about, really, the root of it was what happened to my dad. So he retired from racing, and we all thought he was going to live a long and successful retirement. He actually had his own race team, but he died about 6 months later. So he retired here, and I went to the BRDC. He said, come along, there's a big announcement, and he announced he was retiring from Formula One. So I'd never known a dad who had not raced a car, and how many times a week, how many times a year he'd get in a car and risk his life, and people were dying all the time. So we were massively relieved when he said he was going to stop. And then he carried on racing his team, but then he died only 6 months later.
Oh, gosh.
And so when I stopped racing, one of my goals in life was, in a way, to restore what we'd lost when we were growing up. I was 15 at the time. And I had my own family, and it became increasingly, I had this anxiety about what was going to happen. Now I'd retired, you know. So anyway, I went and had therapy, and I spent the next 15 years going to see a guy near Reading because I just found the whole process very, very interesting. So I would say my issues were resolved fairly quickly, but then I carried on delving into this fascinating world of how we do, why we do what we do, what is motivating us to behave in certain ways and to have certain relationships. And it is a fascinating insight into human nature. So with that, and I wrote a book as well, so with all that, I could basically talk about what happened and explain it, I think, in terms that make sense in the film. And I'm happy to do that. I don't have any, you know, it is difficult sometimes to talk about it, but mostly I'm over all of that. And what we've done is we've taken the story, an essence of the story of my career, what was motivating me, and put it into a film. And it was beautifully put together by Alex Holmes, and the editing with Cinzia Baldassari, who Alex said once he got Cinzia to go through the footage of our family stock of films, you know, home movies and stuff. I took shots of my kids growing up and all the rest of it. So it's got a lot of home movies in there. But she saw something different to him. So it's really a combined directorial project between a man and a woman. So they acted as the insight, two different insights into the film.
Right.
And I think that's what makes it so unique. And he let her guide him as well, because she saw maybe the other side. And most people who watch it, because my wife is the other talking head in the story, most people who watch it say that, you know, what a star my wife is.
Cheers.
So basically, it's come out that she is the superstar in the film, the hero.
You already knew that.
Yeah.
But we always knew that, and I was just trying
She's a
to
good
find a way
foil
to
to
say
you.
it. So
Yeah.
no, she comes out of it very well. So you'll be interested to meet my wife when you watch the movie.
I have to say, just if I can add, I was at the premiere on, what was it, Tuesday night? Yeah. Tuesday night, and look, obviously the F1 movie is great. You guys should all go out and watch it if you haven't already. But I think that there's nothing like a true story when it comes to sports stories. And obviously I'm a motorsport fan, have participated in my whole life. But not to age you, Damon, I was born in 94, 17 days after the passing of Ayrton Senna. So it was an era of Formula One, the 90s, that I missed out on. I wasn't there. I didn't watch Formula One when I was 2 years old. So of course you have access to some archive footage, you hear stories, you see stories from different angles. But I think this is such a wonderful insight, not only into Damon's story, which I think should have been told a long, long time ago in the way it has now, but also his family story. And as you say, like, your wife is the other talking head, and it speaks to the experience of a wife, kids, etc. And yeah, it's just a beautiful film. And like you, I shed multiple tears.
Yeah, it really humanises it in a way that, I guess, you know, and we've all been exposed to Drive to Survive a lot recently, and this kind of brings a softness to it, which I think is quite appealing and quite...
Yeah, I think the Drive to Survive has whet the appetite for people to know more about the people in the sport. And we're very lucky, you know, our sport is incredibly well documented now with the era of mobile phones and people doing films and stuff. You know, the material there of people's lives is so huge, but the fly-on-the-wall documentary style that they've done with Netflix has brought in, has connected with a new fan base massively all over the world. And because they see that these people are emotionally affected by what they're doing, they're not automata in a car. And that's the problem with our sport is that you're concealed. You can't really see what the person is doing, and they can't get an expression. And so it's difficult. When you see, let's say, a runner or a cyclist, you can see the Tour de France guys going up the hill. You can see their faces and their bodies and stuff. But with our sport, you've got a helmet on and stuff. How do you connect? And quite often when they're interviewed, like they've been doing today, they've got that professional front on. And when they come out of the car at the end of the race, when they're being interviewed, they're actually usually zombified. Their brains are fried. They've lost all ability to kind of to express anything. You know, they've been concentrating for so long that you don't get what they're like as real people. And so that's where we're at now. I think is that people are more sympathetic to them because they can connect and understand the pressures they're under.
What the film doesn't, I mean, in addition to the softness, it also doesn't shy away from the rivalries that you experienced in your career, which was fascinating with Michael Schumacher and various others. Do you, you know, watching it, I was kind of thinking, was that rivalry, did it teach you something in the process, or did it just make you pissed off?
It made me pissed off, and it did teach me something, but far too late.
Right.
And so I really wish I'd known. And actually, I was helped during my career by a very smart woman who came and saw me after the dreadful year of '95, where I basically was tripping over myself trying to beat Michael Schumacher, and making a bit of a pig's ear of the championship. And I met this woman at the end because I clearly had taken a psychological beating as well. So it wasn't a great season. And she explained to me, she normally taught politicians how to answer questions. And she gave me media training, in effect. But she was halfway through a sort of moan of mine about, oh, this is the problem, that's the problem, and Michael Schumacher, this and that. And she just went, put her hand up, and she went, save it for the book. And that was like, all I needed was, not now, later, okay?
Yeah.
And I was going to call my autobiography, Save It for the Book, actually. But she was brilliant, and she just lit a switch in my head. You know, she suddenly made me realise that this is a combative environment.
It's gladiatorial, isn't it?
And
really?
in everything you say. And so you've seen Lando bare his soul this early part of the season, and I think you listen to his quotes now, and I think it's changed. Definitely, I think he's learned something. So to answer your question, I wish I'd learned that sooner, but she came just at the right time, because the following year I'd learned all these lessons of how to carry myself in the paddock, and I went on to win the championship. And I think the bullets bounced off, you know, and I think that's what you need to learn. That's something that every driver needs to be prepared for in this environment. It gets very, very intense. You can go through the field, midfield, and you can have a long career not under that much pressure. When you get to the sharp end, it's a whole different game.
Right.
Yeah.
Naomi, we touched a little bit on Drive to Survive, and also F1. Now is a big moment for F1, right? Motor racing, it feels like it's everywhere. It feels like it's suddenly a real part of the kind of wider culture, and not this kind of, not niche, but smaller space that was operated by a specific group. What do you think that exposure has done for the sport? How has it changed it?
Well, look, I think, first of all, Drive to Survive came, I think, at the perfect time. During COVID, when people didn't really have a lot to do, and when most sports had stopped, and it gave people something to hang on to and something to cheer for. But it's done a huge amount for the sport. I think we have to take our hats off to Liberty Media and the way that they've commercialized the sport, in all honesty. And I think Formula One have been able to continue that by constantly trying to think of ways in which they can show up in environments that they potentially hadn't been in before. And I think that's exactly what Drive to Survive did. I remember growing up, you know, none of my girlfriends ever were interested in motor racing, or were interested in even showing up to one of my races, quite frankly.
Really?
Yeah, they just weren't interested.
They're not your friends.
No.
To be fair, the racetracks are usually quite far away in the middle of nowhere, so, you know. But today, that would be totally different. You know, they all want to come to a race. And so I think, firstly, it's brought Formula One into many more homes. But as we said, you know, it tells the stories of all these drivers from a more emotional perspective. We now know all the drivers across the grid rather than just the top 5 or whoever's on the podium every weekend. And I think that has totally changed not only the way that people view the sport, but also who's viewing the sport. And we still have, like, at Sky, for example, our majority audience is still the traditional motorsport fan, which is typically a middle-aged man. But the
Not me anymore.
but the demographic of the audience has massively changed. You know, we have much more younger viewers, we have much more female viewers, and now our task is making sure that we continue to pass on that baton, because Drive to Survive is an entry point, but we need to keep telling that story in a way that's palatable for all of the audience, including the traditional fan and the new fans.
Right.
And that is a little bit of a challenge, but, you know, as I said, Formula One keep thinking of wonderful ways in which to be at the forefront of this wider cultural zeitgeist. You know, Formula One movie, what we did in Miami with the Lego, what is it called, the parade, driver parade. I mean, that's just little nuggets of ways that we can get our sport into homes where we possibly haven't been before. So it's done a huge amount. I think it's done a huge amount for the drivers' salaries as well. So as much as some of them might not like it, I think it's done a wonderful, a lot for the sport and for all the teams commercially as well.
Yeah. Damon, the sport itself has changed a great deal. I mean, it seems to change at a rate of knots in terms of technology and safety since you were racing. Would you want to race now?
It's like saying, would you like to be 21 again, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, of course you would, you know.
Right.
I've been involved in the development of Silverstone when I was on the BRDC board, and none of this was here. So I've played my part in the growth of Silverstone, and also seen it change. And of course, it's satisfying to see the thing change. What you're worried about more than anything is losing the essence of what it is. You know, if it becomes too much entertainment, that's the worry, because I think there was a sincerity about the sport going back a long way, because the only you could risk your life doing it, and so the only people who did it were people who really sincerely wanted to be racing drivers. And so nowadays there's a lot safer, which is good. But I think they're also, the emphasis is on, and you can see it with Max Verstappen. He just doesn't want to play the game. He doesn't want to be a performing, character.
Right.
He wants to be a racing driver. That's all he wants to do. And I think he should be allowed to do that. And but you know, there's pressure on them to show themselves malarking about or doing this, that, and the other. But I think you're right. The Lego thing was brilliant because everyone was laughing, weren't they? They were just. I mean,
I think we've never seen them have
hysterical.
more fun ever.
Yeah, and they were all smashed to bits. The Lego cars.
Yeah, they were, those cars. I worked
Lego,
on it with Lego, that project, and each car was made out of 400,000 Lego bricks. You can imagine the hours and the passion that went into putting a lot of detail into each and every one of these cars. And I think maybe one or two of them came back with all the pieces on them. Two of them didn't make it back. So the question at the beginning was, do you think that they'll race each other? And I was like, do you think they'll race each other? Yes, they will.
Damon, you talked a little bit about the danger of it, and obviously you were very connected to that. You were on the track when Ayrton Senna had his fatal crash. I mean, it's, as you say, it's obviously changed. Was there something, how did you manage the danger of it, and how did your wife deal with the danger of it in your family?
Well, my wife was amazing. I mean, she never once asked me to stop, even though we had a family. And sadly, this was not the first teammate I'd had who died. I lost a teammate early in the season when I was doing Formula 3, called a Canadian guy called Bertrand Fabi. And so along the way, we'd lost people, but it was something that I grew up with, and you kind of factored it in. But there had been such a long gap before any fatalities in a race. It was over 10 years since the last person that ever died. A Formula 1 driver had died in a Formula 1 car. It was Elio De Angelis, and that was not in a race. So, you know, it was becoming. People were becoming maybe immune to the danger, perhaps, or they're oblivious to it. And of course, when Ayrton and Roland died in one weekend, then it was a big shock to everyone. But I didn't think I had any illusions about the sport, and my conclusion was they loved racing, and I don't think anybody raced without knowing that it was dangerous. So I think that every driver had factored in if this goes wrong here or this goes wrong there, that something awful could happen. But I'm prepared to take that chance. And so because you love it, because you got something out of it. Now you can't ask the people that can't come back what they would have done. That's the imponderable. But we all got back in our racing cars and we got over it and we carried on. And Sterling Moss always said that he thought the danger was that, like the spice in the food, you know, it was the thing that made the racing special, or being a racing driver special. But I think that we don't want to see anyone get hurt. We're amazed when we saw Romain Grosjean get out, and so relieved that he got out of that incredible accident that he had. And everyone was, so happy. I don't think anybody wants to see anyone get hurt. We want to see action. We want to see, we want to see all the exciting things happen. But now we've got to the point where we want to go home feeling good. We don't want to go home feeling
scared. How would you feel if one of your children wanted to become a Formula One driver?
Well, my second son, my first son's got Down syndrome, so he wasn't interested. But my second son, Josh, he raced for a while. He was very good, and then he decided, I think he recognised he hadn't got the competitive killer in him. He didn't want to do it above all else.
Right.
And so he decided to become a drummer. Anyway, he now works in Formula One as an expert host. He's not here this weekend, but he does other things and in driver coach as well. So he's in the industry, but he's not. He decided to. He's very big now as well. I don't think he'd be fast. He'd be too much.
It's a bit of a problem for the next generation, right? Everyone's
they're 6 foot, over 6 foot. They're really tall. Ollie Behrman and Ocon and who else is very tall?
Tall chaps.
Yeah.
George is pretty tall, to be fair.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know about you, but I'm hoping that my kid is not into racing. Somehow we've got to say this is a terrible awful sport. It's not interesting at all.
You wait.
I know, gosh. Anyway.
Naomi, you touched on this a little bit, but Formula One is becoming more plural. It's becoming a more open space. What do you think has changed, and what do you think still needs to change, and how will it change?
I get asked this question a lot, and I have to say, probably if you would have asked me this question about 5-6 years ago, I would have said that there's still a lot that needs to change, and that whilst there was a lot of talk about change, we were seeing the pace of that change moving very, very slowly. Today, I have to say that I think that we're in a very good place. There's always more that you can do, of course. But when you look at initiatives like F1 Academy and how well received that has been, and the fact that all 10 teams have got on board and they've got drivers in the cars, and it's not just a badging project. People are not putting stickers on cars and not caring about what happens behind the scenes. The teams are actually taking those young drivers on board and they're using them in their development programs. The F1 drivers are sitting with them and teaching them things. So I think that we have come a long way in that way. And if you look at the F1 paddock today, it is very diverse. There are so many women in the paddock. There are a few people of color in the paddock. There's probably a little bit of work to be done there still. But you have to say that the intentions are all in the right place, and there have been a lot of initiatives. I mean, even Lewis has obviously been at the forefront of, raising this subject and pushing for things to move forward. But I have to say, look, you can only expect so much change in a short period of time. And we're not anymore in the space where I feel that change, often is met with resistance. We're not there anymore. People are open to change. They're starting to understand why it's beneficial for them as well. And slowly we're seeing the results. But of course, we still, have higher targets to reach. We want to see a woman on the grid one day. But do I think that's going to happen overnight? No, it's not. It takes a lot of work. It's probably going to take a generational change for us to see true change. But the intentions are there, the work is being done, and we're in a very positive space.
Good. Damon, you competed in Formula One from 1992 to 1999, correct? And you won 22 Grand Prix. Was that period in your life joyful, or was it deeply anxiety-inducing?
Bit of both.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's intense, I think it's a way of describing it. So it's very full on, and you get the sense that you're really living to the maximum. And sometimes you're exhausted, and sometimes you don't want to live to the maximum. You want to go and have a break. But yeah, very intense. And the time in your life where you've got a chance to give it give whatever your career is, everything you've got, and see where you end up. So I'm very, very pleased with what I did. I started very late in F1. I mean, I was ridiculously too old to start. I was 32, so it was all back to front. But I cracked on when I got there. I managed to get it done.
I imagine the highs must only come when you win. Are there other highs within it?
I don't think so.
No,
I think obviously it's great to win. Sometimes when you win a race, it can feel like it was too easy. We did have a car advantage, and sometimes it was like a case of, that wasn't the battle I was after. The battle I really was after was the one in Suzuka to keep the World Championship alive against Michael Schumacher, and it was teeming with rain and stuff, and absolutely had to drive out of my skin to beat him. And I beat Michael Schumacher in the wet, and I had some great drives in the wet, and those are the ones that you really are pleased about, because the degree of difficulty is so massively high. I mean, Spa in '98, I was just, I held it together. Somehow Michael went out, crashed into David Coulthard, but you couldn't see anything. You could not see. You were literally driving into spray. And it was a big test. And actually, after that race, I decided I'm definitely too old for this. I'm going to stop soon.
Was that the worst race you had?
It wasn't the worst, but it was. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do this anymore. I don't think. I realised that the degree of the concentration and what it took out of me was so much that I think I realised that the end was coming, because you have to be able to be wholly invested in driving at that level just to stay on the track. And it's harder the older you get.
Forgive me if I'm mistaken, but I think you won a Grand Prix at Silverstone once, is that correct?
Yes, well, I won the British Grand Prix in '94.
Yeah.
My dad never won the British Grand Prix, but he won Monaco 5 times, and I never won Monaco.
But you came very, very, very
close.
I tantalisingly close, Naomi. But we had a good, we have a good CV, but only won the British Grand Prix once. But that's great to put it in the cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, what was that like, winning on home turf? Like, what's it like racing at Silverstone?
It was amazing, but of course, the crowd was much smaller than me. When I look back at pictures, I was on the podium with Princess Diana. She presented the trophy, and there's some great pictures, great memories. But really, the crowd was quite small by comparison to today. We were up at the other paddock, up the road there, and you thought it was a huge event. But it was really people standing around in a field, really, compared to what it is now.
What were the greatest highs? What was the greatest high? I mean, it must have been winning the championship, right? But was there something else?
The greatest high I think is being involved in the event, and being involved. So going to Adelaide the first time with a chance to have the World Championship, it was like going to prize fight. The atmosphere was electric. Okay. And the whole town, Adelaide was a great place to end the season because the whole place became a party town. You know that people are watching back home, but they had to get up in the middle of the night and all this stuff. And there was a real sense of occasion and event. And I would say it was very similar to Abu Dhabi in 21. The tension, it was just so exciting. But that was the best. That was the high. Once the race is over, you kind of almost immediately sort of go flat.
Right.
You feel relief afterwards, but you want to be doing it rather than it being over.
Got it. Naomi, how did you decide to get into racing? What was your kind of journey into the sport originally?
So I was born in Belgium, and when I was about 4 years old, my family moved to South Africa. And I was always very, very competitive as a young child. So I competed in judo, swimming, and athletics mostly. But I remember my dream toy always being like one of those electric cars you can get in and drive. And I remember always begging my dad if I could sit on his lap and drive the car. So I think somewhere deep down inside of me, there was this innate will to drive, but I never was really exposed to it. Until I was 11, when I was invited to an indoor go-karting birthday party. Okay. And so there I was. Obviously, I was quite good at it, because if I was not good at it, then I would have hated it. So I had a great time. And then at the end of the day, I was devastated that it was over and said to my dad, please, will you take me back again? And he did take me back a few times. And as I said, I was 11 years old. So instead of buying me a go-kart because I clearly was showing a lot of interest. My dad thought better for him to buy himself a go-kart first and make sure that this was something that I was actually committed to rather than just splurging a lot of money on buying me a very expensive piece of equipment. So I followed him to the go-kart track, and he would always rent a kart for me to get on track with him. And the day that I started overtaking him, he thought, oh, okay, maybe I should put this kart away and get her a real kart. So that was about a year after, actually, no, let me take that back. Maybe roughly 6-7 months after I'd been to that indoor karting birthday party, he got me my own go-kart, and we probably practiced for a good 6 months before I entered my first race.
Right.
So yeah, within a year I was on the racetrack, and yeah, the rest is kind of history. I won the club championship, which was not major first year, but I did well enough for my first year. And then instead of going into regional level, which would have been the next step, I went straight up into national level and finished second in the South African Championships. So that qualified me for Team South Africa in the World Championships, and that's what I did for 4 years consecutively, flying all over the world, racing go-karts, meeting some of the drivers who you see on the grid today.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's just where the love of motorsport came from.
Was your ambition to be an F1 driver? Was that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would say that, look, I was lucky enough to have a 16-year-long racing career from karts into single-seaters, then into GTs, prototypes. Like I raced a little bit of everything. But along the way, the goalpost definitely shifted, but the dream was always to be an F1 driver. No matter what, wherever that goalpost went, the ultimate dream was always to be an F1. And unfortunately, well, I should say, fortunately, I made it into the F1 paddock. Unfortunately, it's with a mic in my hand and not a steering wheel, so...
What's it like in the commentator's box? Do you enjoy that side of things? Do you find it fulfilling?
No, I leave the commentary up to David Croft and Martin Brundle.
Cool.
But no, it's fantastic. Look, again, it's so surreal. I mean, people underestimate the amount of work that goes into just even being able to race in go-karts and how much your family sacrifices for you to be able to do that. So to have made it into F1, regardless of the fact that I have no steering wheel in my hand, is super full circle, you know. I mean, there's a lot of people who... I mean, my dad took a second loan on his house for me to go racing. So to be standing alongside people like Damon and Martin and people that I looked up to when I was young and racing, and then, of course, working along... Like, Lewis was my idol when I was racing. I started racing in the same year that Lewis got into F1. And so to have done my very first interview in Formula One with the man that I idolized growing up is very full circle. So, yeah, it's fantastic.
If you could race any track today, right now, which would it be?
Spa.
Damon?
That's a too easy answer. Or Sepang.
I think it would be... they don't race in it anymore, but the old Brands Hatch long circuit was the most beautiful track.
Oh, really? Why?
Yeah. It just went up and down, and it had corners everywhere. It was just beautiful shape through the Kent countryside. But now of all the tracks, I'd probably race somewhere safe like Hungary.
If you could go head-to-head with any driver now, who would it be?
Head-to-head?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be a racing driver if you didn't say Max Verstappen, right?
Oh, I guess so. That's true. Damon, same?
Well, you always want to measure yourself against the best. So, yeah, I think I'd find out I was a lot slower than Max Verstappen, but we'll give it a go.
Yeah. I wouldn't have to wait for this head-to-head. I used to go on the go-kart track with Max all the time.
Did you?
I
You can
know that
outside
already.
you could definitely outside.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
David, Naomi, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us.